Okay, welcome back. So today we're looking at May-June 2022, question paper 11. So we start at the bottom again. First question is, what is likely to cause an immediate decrease in the size of the labour force? So remember, labour force is the number of people aged between 18 to 64 who are willing and able to work. So what's going to decrease the amount of people who are willing and able to work? If we have a fall in the average size of families, that's not going to have an immediate decrease in the size of labour force. Okay, that just means that people are having less children on average. Remember, we're dealing with the 18 to 64 age group. If there's a fall in the birth rate, that will not have an immediate decrease in the size of the labour force. That will have a decrease in the size of the labour force in, let's say, 18 years, when those children that are being born now are available or willing and able to work. If we have an increase in net immigration, that will actually increase, not decrease, the labour force. Remember that immigration is in, so more people coming in than going out, and emigration is out. However, if we have a reduction in the age of retirement, so if we move from 18 to 64 to, let's say, 18 to 60, what's that going to do? That's going to immediately decrease all the people who used to be aged between 61, 62 and 63 and 64 who were able to work before, and now they have to retire. So that would be the one that would cause an immediate decrease. Okay, what topic is not included in macroeconomics? So basically what they're asking us here is, which topic is macro? Okay, now remember, macro is something that affects the whole economy. Microeconomics is the study and behavior of individuals, firms and individual markets. So consumer demand would be a microeconomic topic. We study demand in microeconomics, unit 2. Economies of scale is another microeconomic topic that's studied in Unit 3. Remember that anything in Unit 1 to 3 is micro and anything in Unit 4 to 6 is macro. Economies of scale is average cost of production comes down for a firm, and that's an individual firm, therefore it's a micro topic. Forms of competition is also another micro topic, so again, we'd be looking at the forms of competition in an individual industry or an individual market. So therefore it'd be micro by definition. Whereas inflation would affect the whole economy, so it would be a macro concept. Okay, question 28. What activity is correctly linked to the organization that provides it? So we've got the central banks and the commercial banks here. So let's take a look at the commercial banks first. Do the commercial banks safeguard the country's foreign reserves? No, they don't. That's what the central bank does. And do the commercial bank manage the government's financial accounts? No, they don't. So remember that a commercial bank are like the private institutions. So in China, commercial banks would be Bank of China, ICBC, China Construction Banks, all the banks that we see on our high streets or on the streets every day. The central bank is controlled by the government, and the government uses the central bank to regulate the rate of inflation. So A is our correct answer there. The central bank will get direction from the government on what the inflation rate will be, and then they will direct it to these guys, and then the commercial bank will offer those interest rates to their customers. So they'll provide guidance on what the interest rate should be. Setting direct taxes is a role of the government themselves, not the role of a central bank. Sorry, let me just take this out. Okay. So A there. What is the definition of a foreign exchange rate? So we don't need to provide too much information on this, you just need to learn these definitions. Definition of a foreign exchange rate is the price of one currency in terms of another. So C is our correct answer here. Difference between the value of imports and exports, that's to do with trading. Difference between emigration and immigration, that's what we call either net immigration or net emigration, the number of people coming in or out of a country, and that is referenced down below. We talked about that in question 30, I think it was. And the price of one good in terms of another, well, that would be a comparison between two goods, so nothing to do with currencies, which is what foreign exchange rate is. Okay, question 26. So the table shows some economic indicators which increase in the first indicator. So we know that the first indicator here is going to go up, will lead to an increase in the second indicator. So we know that both have to go up here. Okay, so let's have a look at them. The first one is a budget surplus. And what is a budget surplus? If we can remember, a budget surplus is where government revenue is higher than government expenditure. Okay, so if government revenue is higher than government expenditure, what we can assume is that the government has started to collect more taxes. And if the government has collected more taxes, then people are going to have less money, right? So we can assume that consumer saving would have gone down instead of going up. Okay, the second one, if we have an increase in consumer spending, so if we bring this across here, an increase in consumer spending, that's a component of AD. So aggregate demand will move to the right. Okay, now what do we know about when aggregate demand moves to the right? We know that it results in, generally, national income, employment, and living standards all increasing. Okay, so unemployment is not likely to increase. Unemployment is likely to be lower because employment is likely to go up as we're shifting AD to the right through an increase in consumer expenditure. Okay, and the third one is inflation and trade surplus. So what we need to remember here, or what we need to look at, is what happens when we have inflation. So we know, first of all, that a trade surplus is where our exports are higher than our imports. Okay, and now if we have inflation, that is a rise in the price of goods and services. So what inflation is going to do is it's going to make our exports go down and our imports go up. So it's not going to result in a trade surplus. It's actually going to create, or can create, a trade deficit. Okay, because our exports become more expensive, so people will import from other countries instead, as our products in our country get more expensive, and less people will buy our exports in other countries because they've got more expensive due to inflation. So the correct answer here is D, an increase in productivity. So if we're making more goods and services, our output increases. What does that mean? That means that our GDP, or our real GDP, is likely to increase. And if our real GDP increases, then the living standards for people are also likely to increase. Okay, question 25. The governments of low-income countries often allow foreign multinational companies to mine minerals in their country. What conflict between benefit and cost might this cause the low-income countries? Okay, so would it result in an improved balance of trade, higher employment, increased profits, or more sustainable development? So the first one, if we start at the bottom, it's not going to result in more sustainable development. Why? They're mining minerals, and we know that minerals are a limited resource, right? So it's actually going to decrease sustainable development. and it may lead to economic growth. So these two are flipped. Economic growth would be a benefit and a cost would be unsustainable development. Will it result in increased profits for the MNCs? Yeah, sure it will, but remember that we're asked about what is the cost and the benefit for the countries themselves, right? So that's a benefit for the MNC, not a benefit for the country. Will it result in improved balance of trade or training by the MNCs? So again, we can see straight away that this one is wrong. Why? Because training by the MNCs, that's not going to be a cost, because people in these low-income countries are going to get trained by these foreign multinationals. So they're going to get better education and better skills so they can get better jobs in the future. So that would actually be a benefit. So we can identify straight away that that one is wrong. Whereas the correct answer would be B. If we have higher employment, more people in these low-income countries have a job. But the cost of that, like I said for part D, mining minerals, it's a limited resource, also known as a finite resource. So we're going to be depleting our resources of minerals by letting them come in. Okay, question 24. What is the purpose of an economy's production possibility curve? Okay, so I'm just going to give you the correct answer here. It shows the productive capacity in an economy at a point in time. So remember that when we draw a PPC, we should all know what that looks like at this point. We have, let's say, good A and good B. So it shows productive capacity for two goods in an economy at a point in time. So I think they should actually expand their definition of it there, what the purpose of it is. And any point along this curve shows the maximum level of output that we can have with the current level of resources that we have. So it doesn't measure supply of services. Goods and services would be measured by GDP. It doesn't firms. It's only looking at two goods, remember. And it doesn't answer the question of what to produce in an economy. All those questions are not applicable to PPC. PPC can show how we reallocate resources, or it can show inefficiency by being inside the curve, or it can show scarcity by being outside the curve. But that's all it will show. It won't answer any of the three fundamental basic economic problem questions. Okay, question 23. So why would standards of living fall when there is a recession? So this is pretty simple. When we have a recession, that's a period where GDP reduces consecutively for 6 months. So national income down, employment down, living standards down, right? So in this case, what would happen? Would the government increase taxes to combat the recession? No. They would likely decrease taxes to combat the recession. Increasing taxes is a contractionary fiscal policy, and that would be designed to move AD further to the left. But if we move AD further to the left, all we're going to do is create more of a recession. Because remember that recession is a period of 6 months or more where GDP goes down. So to fix a recession, we got to move AD to the right. We've got to use expansionary fiscal policy or expansionary monetary policy. And in this case for A, expansionary fiscal would be to decrease taxes. Okay, there would be a rise in the level of immigration. So that would also be wrong. There would be a rise in the level of emigration. If the economy is doing poorly, why would people move into our country? They wouldn't. They would move out of our country. So we would not get more immigration, we'd get more emigration. And the value of the domestic currency would increase. That's also wrong. Whoa. Okay. However, like I said, with national income, employment, etc., purchasing power of households would fall. Why is that? purchasing power of households would fall because they've got less money to spend. If their national income goes down, they will have less money in their pockets at the end of the month to be spending. Okay, the table shows three people, X, Y, and Z, and how they spend their income. What is the likely order of income from lowest income to highest income? Okay, so remember, we've got to rank it from lowest to highest. The first thing we need to identify is which one is the lowest. So the lowest will be the one that's spending the most on necessities. And we can see here that our necessities are food, clothing, and housing. So that would be person Z, right? They're spending 50% of their income on basic necessities. And the lowest income is also likely to be spending the least on luxury goods. Things they don't need that they only want. And we can see they're only spending 25% here. So we know that Z will be first because they're lowest income, so we can get rid of A and B. Now we need to find the second, and we just do the same thing. Person X is spending 35% or 30% of their income on necessities and 35% on these luxury goods here. But person Y is only spending 25% on food and clothing or necessities and 40% on luxury. So that tells us that person Y, in this case, is going to be the richest or the highest income. They spend the least amount on necessities. So ZXY will be ranking them from lowest to highest. Okay, an economy experiences a recession and moves from full employment to 5% unemployment. So which movement from X to Y on the PPC diagram shows the consequence for the economy? Okay, so we just talked about this, and what I said was, if we have 5% unemployment, what does that mean? That means we still have the same amount of resources available in an economy, but we're not using as many. So we're going to move from being on our curve to a point that is inside the curve. Therefore, A will be our correct answer here. What we can see in B is that we've had a shift in the PPC. So that would be a decrease in the quantity and or the quality of resources. Okay? Now, we haven't had a decrease in the quantity or quality. We're just using less resources when we get more unemployment. And if unemployment goes down, we're just using more resources. So we'll never have a shift with unemployment. We'll only have a movement in the curve or back onto the curve if unemployment is lower. X to Y in C, that just shows an opportunity cost. So we've just made a decision that we want to produce more capital goods instead of more consumer goods. So that's not going to show unemployment, it's just showing an opportunity cost. And from here, from X to Y, we were at a position of scarcity, so we didn't have enough resources to achieve this level of production, and now we've moved to a point where we're at an efficient level of production. However, we know that we've got 5% unemployment, so we know that we're not being efficient. Therefore, we have to be somewhere inside the curve. Okay, question 20. What is a likely cause of economic growth? So, when we have economic growth, what's happening? Generally, not always though, AD is going right and our real GDP for sure is increasing. Right? And we said that when that happens, what we have normally is we will have national income goes up, employment goes up, living standards go up, right? Economic growth is an increase in real GDP, so GDP has to increase. Therefore, it won't be decreased unemployment because we're likely to have increased employment. Would we be likely to have decreased investment? No, we're likely to have more investment because we're generating more goods and services through an increase in real GDP. We're also likely to have an increase in productivity, again the same reason. We're producing more goods and services, It wouldn't make sense if we have economic growth and a decrease in productivity at the same time. But what we are likely to have is decreased taxation. So we can link that in here. We know it's expansionary fiscal policy, and it's linked into why AD would move to the right, which may result in real GDP moving to the right. Okay, question 19. Which government action will not add directly to the quality or quantity of human resources? Okay, if we improve health facilities, will that add to people? Of course it will. That's going to add to giving people better access to healthcare. If we invest in education, people are going to get better skills. So our human resources are going to get better quality and quantity possibly as well. And if we provide better food and nutrition, they're going to get sick less. So that's also going to help the quality of human resources. However, if we reclaim land from the sea, great example of land reclamation is Dubai. I've showed you guys that in class, where we have the palm area of Dubai and they have all the new houses that are built, etc. That's not going to increase quantity and or quality of human resources, is it? Because it's not going to really affect people. But better food and nutrition, better education and better health facilities will affect people directly. Okay, why would an increase in the interest rate potentially lead to lower inflation? So, talked about this already. Increasing the interest rate, what is that? That's contractionary monetary policy, and that is designed to shift AD to the left. Okay, now what happens when we increase our interest rates? When we increase our interest rates, it becomes easier for people to save money because they're getting more money back from the bank, and it becomes harder for them to borrow money. So producers be more willing to invest. That's not true. Why? They're going to need to borrow from the bank in order to invest, and borrowing from the bank would be harder because they have to pay back more money. So that's the same reason why C is wrong. Will consumers be more willing to spend? Not really. If they have the majority of their money kept in a bank account because they're getting more interest rates, that's going to reduce their spending. But it will make them more willing to save when the interest rates are high. They're going to put their money into the bank accounts with the bank because the bank are going to pay them more money for keeping their money in there. Okay, what's an example of fiscal policy measure? So remember, fiscal policy is the use of two things: taxes and government spending. So we can find it out from here. If we increase the exchange rate, that is a monetary policy, not a fiscal policy. Reducing the power of trade unions, that's regulatory policy. Okay, may also become a supply side in some circumstances. If we reduce the corporation tax, well, that's a tax, so we know that that is a fiscal policy. And setting a lower interest rate, that's also a monetary policy, not a fiscal policy. Okay, question 16. What is an advantage of a country having a market economic system with a large private sector? Okay, what do we know about our advantages of market economic system? The key words that we learn in class are: it creates choice, which creates lower prices and creates higher quality products. That's the main advantage that we went through in class before, right? But we also have another advantage we talked about, and the keywords for those were rewards and punishments. So what do I mean by that? The reason why we have more choice and therefore lower prices is because we don't have any government intervention. So firms that are not very good at what they do, they're going to die out and they're going to be punished if they cannot respond to the changes in consumer demand. Firms will become profitable is another advantage if they do produce what consumers want. And if firms are producing what consumers want, then that's a good thing for consumers also. So all the other options here are incorrect. Market forces often fail to ensure maximum benefits for society. That's a disadvantage, not an advantage. Goods will not be provided at all or in sufficient quantity. What are we talking here? We're talking about public goods, for example, that won't be provided at all. That's another disadvantage, not an advantage. And there's an unequal distribution of income. Same thing. That's another disadvantage. Okay, question 15. A government removed the quota on goods imported into the country. So, what have we done? We've essentially made it easier. Remember, a quota is a limit on the number of goods that can be imported. So if we remove the quota, we've made it easier to import goods from other countries. Okay, so what will that do? Will it result in a decrease in the balance of trade deficit? No, it won't. It will result in an increase in the balance of trade deficit. Balance of trade deficit means that we're importing more and exporting less. So if it becomes easier to import goods, what are we going to do? Our imports are going to go up and our exports are going to go down. Therefore, our balance of trade deficit will increase, not decrease. Oh, okay. Will it result in a decrease in exports? Possibly yes. However, it's more likely to just increase the number of imports, right? So because our imports will go up, that will increase our trade deficit. But we may still be exporting the same amount of goods because those exports will not be as adversely affected by the removal of a quota. They may go down, that's true, but it's not the most likely result. And a decrease in domestic unemployment? No, it's likely to go the other way. We may have more domestic unemployment, especially if our exports go down, there'll be less jobs available for people. But a decrease in demand for domestic production is the most likely thing to happen. As we switch to more imports, people will import instead of buying from their own country. So nothing to do with exports, just to do with the domestic market for goods and services. Okay, which combination is necessary for the construction of a consumer prices index? So first of all, do we need price stability? No, we don't. Okay, why? Because it's what measures our price stability essentially. So we don't need it to make it, but we do need weights and we do need a base year. So B is our correct answer here. Remember, when we construct our CPI, what we have is we have the base year, we have the price changes for the goods and services that take place, and then we have the weights, and we multiply them together to find our final CPI calculation. Okay, the development of artificial intelligence in machines raises the productivity of capital. What will be the effect of this? So, AI comes over and makes our capital more productive. Will that make the supply of capital decrease? Definitely not. If we become more productive, we're likely to increase our supply of capital. Or it will stay the same and we're able to supply more to the market for whatever good and service we're making. Will it result in the price of capital falling? No, probably not. Price of capital will stay the same. But it will result in the demand for capital increasing. Because we get more productive, we're going to be demanding more capital. And the cost of production will not increase, We have no information on how it will do that. It's likely to decrease the cost of production because we're getting more productive. So we're making more with less. Okay, a student has nothing to do on Friday evening. She withdraws $5 from the $100 she has in a savings account and buys a present to take to a party to which admission is free. What does this involve? So this is to do with our opportunity cost. And what we need to be careful of is she takes out $5. So that's the decision that she's made, right? So in this case, the opportunity cost is going to be equal to the other goods that she could have bought for the $5. She hasn't made a decision with the other $95, so it can't be A. Remember, it's the next best alternative to a decision that we make, and her decision was to take $5 to buy a present. And there is no opportunity cost is wrong. There is, because there's money involved, $5. So D and C, no opportunity cost is wrong. Opportunity cost is equal to what she could have bought for her decision to take out $5. Okay. Which row shows an essential characteristic of competitive markets and monopoly markets? So remember that what do competitive markets have? They have lots of buyers and lots of sellers. A monopoly markets is just one firm that controls the market. So once we know that, we should be able to identify it. Oh. Sorry, I've got mosquitoes in my apartment here. We should be able to identify it as A. Okay, many buyers and many sellers in a competitive market, but only a single seller in a monopoly market. So it could have been, if we look at the first one, B also, but we don't have a single buyer in a monopoly market. We have one seller who still gets to control all the buyers, and there'd be many buyers. Okay, question 10. A manufacturer of medical supplies benefits from improved road links to its main markets. What benefit definitely occurs as a result? Okay, so which one will absolutely occur? We've improved the road links, right? So what is that? Is that something that we have done as a business ourselves? No, it's not. It's something that has happened externally. And will it benefit or be a disadvantage to our business? So first of all, it's not going to affect our average revenue. That's just going to be our selling price, right? Of course, it may in the future allow us to increase our market share, but the problem is all the other medical supply companies are going to be able to use the same road. Internal economies of scale are the economies of scale where we benefit from what we can control, right? And that's how efficiently we run our business. So that's where our average cost of production comes down as we efficiently run our business. But in this case, the road links that have been built, probably by the government, would be an external economy of scale. It reduces our average costs due to the fact of something that was outside of our control, something that was done by a third party. Okay, question 9. A firm has a high price elasticity of supply for its product. What does this indicate? Okay, remember that when PES is elastic, what does that mean? That means that the percentage change in quantity supplied will be bigger proportionately than the percentage change in price. So when price changes, the firm is quickly able to react and increase the level of supply that they flood to the market. So our correct answer here will be B. It produces a good that has close substitutes. Substitutes are something that is an effect or a factor that affects PED, not PES. If they keep very low volumes of product in stock, that's not going to help them to have an elastic PES, is it? Because that means they're not going to be very responsive to the changes in price. So they would likely have an inelastic PES if they had low volumes of stock. and they can increase revenue by reducing price. That is something that PED tells us. So PED tells us that when we have an elastic PED, we can increase the total revenue we have by decreasing our price. Not something that PES tells us. Okay, table shows the world output of iron ore and the average yearly price for 4 years. What can be concluded about the relationship between world output of iron ore and the average yearly price over the 4 years? Okay, so basically all we have to do here is we have to read the table, right? And if we start at the bottom here, world output is lowest, the average yearly price is the lowest. So world output is lowest is in year 3, 2.22. Is our average yearly price the lowest? No, it's lowest in year 4. So we know that one's wrong. World output the lowest and average yearly price the highest, and we can see world output is the lowest in year 3, but world output or yearly price is the highest in year 2. So that's also wrong. Correct answer is A. World output is highest in year 2, and the average yearly price is also the highest. Whereas in B, the yearly price is not the highest, or the yearly price is not the lowest in year 2, it's the lowest in year 4. So that one has to be wrong also. Okay, now this is a very difficult question. A lot of students got this wrong. Diagram shows fixed cost, variable cost, and total cost of a firm, right? So, how do we identify what they are? Fixed costs, when we're producing 0 units of output, we still have costs here. So this is going to represent our fixed costs, right? Because it doesn't change as we produce more. Here we can see that variable costs will be 0 when we have 0 levels of output, so we know that's variable. And then this one must be our total cost, our variable cost plus our fixed cost. Okay? Which distance represents the firm's variable cost? So, I'll give you the correct answer first and then I'll give you my explanation. The correct answer is QS. Okay? Now why? You can see here that the gap between variable cost and total cost is this value, right? So what are we essentially doing here? That means that variable cost must be from Q to S, because we must be adding our fixed cost onto that to get our total cost. So this area would be representing our fixed cost as we move further with a level of output, right? Variable cost will be shown by the full difference between the output and where we are on the curve. Hence the reason why our total cost is higher. Okay? If it didn't, our variable cost would be the same as our total cost. But that's not the case. Because we've got a gap here, we know that this must be taking account of our fixed costs separately, because our total cost is VC plus FC. Okay, we're nearly there. Question 6. The diagram shows the demand and supply for apples. To what extent is the market in disequilibrium at $2.5 per kilo? So, we're in equilibrium here. If we go to 2.5, we can see we're at this point and we're at this point. So it's very simple. How do we calculate that disequilibrium? Our supply is 800 tons, or 800,000 tons, and our demand is 400,000 tons. So what's 800,000 minus 400,000? It's 400,000. And which one is bigger? Supply is further to the right, so we know that it's a surplus or excess supply. In other words, supply is exceeding demand here by 400,000 units. Okay, a government retrains unemployed industrial workers to increase employment opportunities. The policy may have adverse effects. So adverse effects means negative effects, right, on government macroeconomic aims. So what we're looking for is we're looking for anything that causes negative effects here. Better skilled workers increase productivity and improve economic growth. That can't be our answer because that's a positive thing, right? That's not a negative thing. Near full employment may result in a more stable balance of payments. Again, that's something that we want to achieve, not something that's negative. More employed workers may reduce government expenditure on benefit payments. So again, that's also another positive, right? Government is paying less money to people who don't have a job. That's a good thing, not a bad thing for a government. So the correct answer is B. Now this is quite difficult if you don't use process of elimination from figuring out which one is positive and which one is negative. But essentially, if people are earning more money, how can that lead to demand pull inflation? Right? Now normally we know that wage earning capacity will lead to increase in cost of production. It will lead to cost push inflation, not demand pull. But it may possibly also lead to demand pull. Remember that demand pull inflation is inflation where AD moves to the right. Okay? And in that case, if I just put, I'm just going to say real GD here, you know it's GDP, right? If people are earning more money, what are they going to do? They're going to demand more goods and more services. So what that might do is it might increase consumer expenditure. And that's going to result in here, as we can see, an increase in real GDP, which is a good thing. But it might also increase the price level as more goods and services are demanded. So it may actually also result in demand pull inflation. Okay, question. Oh, mosquito is back. Question 4. US government introduces tariffs on steel imported from China. So what are they doing? They're taxing steel imports from China. This increases the price of imported Chinese steel. Whose income is likely to increase as a result of direct result? Now think about it. What's going to happen to the Chinese steel producers? Is their income going to increase? No, definitely not. Because they're now going to sell less to the United States. But will the income of the US government increase? Yes, it will. Because they're going to be collecting taxes on whatever steel products are still sold into the USA. So US government will benefit from putting a tariff on steel, but the Chinese steel producers won't. Okay, which components in addition to GDP per head are included in the HDI? So we've gone through this so many times, I'm not going to spend too long on it. Life expectancy at birth and expected years of schooling. Question comes up very similar almost every year. Just learn the components of HDI. Normally in the exam they mention life expectancy, expected years of schooling, or sometimes they call it mean years of schooling. Okay, things like gender equality, etc. are not included in HDI. What would cause an increase in demand for a factor of production? Okay, would an increase in the price of the factor of production? No, that's going to reduce the demand, right? Or cause a contraction in demand. Because if the price of it becomes more expensive, we're not going to want to use it as much. Increase in the demand for the good or service produced, that would. So if we think about it in common sense manner, right? If more goods and services are being produced, we need to use more resources to make them. And the factors of production, land, labour, capital and enterprise, we're going to have to use more of them to make more goods and services. So obviously when we get more demand for a good, let's say it's coffee, we're going to need to put or use more land, labour, capital and enterprise to make the coffee, so we can meet the demand. A decrease in the efficiency would decrease the demand for a factor of production, and a decrease in the price of an alternative factor of production. Okay, quite possibly, but again, we might need certain factors of production to make this product. So it'll be the demand of the good or service that will directly affect it. Okay, and finally, so a government uses supply side policies measures to improve economic performance where policy measure would not satisfy one of their macroeconomic aims. Okay, well, straight away I can tell you that it's A, changing the tax system which leads to more tax evasion. So that would not be an aim of a government, to have less people paying tax. That's a terrible thing for a government. Retraining redundant workers, which lowers unemployment. Again, we're asked which would not satisfy. Lower unemployment is an aim of the government, so that would satisfy one of the aims. Increasing economic growth is an aim of the government, so that would satisfy one of their aims in this case. And improving the balance of payments or stability in the balance of payments is a macroeconomic aim of the government also, so that would also satisfy one of their aims. Okay, hope this helped. Thank you for listening.